If you feel like you have been showing up consistently in your practice and still not getting the visibility that you feel that you deserve, then this one is for you. So, in this video, we're going to talk about how your ability to communicate is directly impacting your business by way of how you are listening. So, before we dive in, I invite you to take my 2-minute Are You the Bottleneck quiz to find out who or what is slowing down your progress. And also, the nice things that complement these videos is my podcast. So I highly recommend you check it out, which is called The Fear Chronicles, which is false evidence appearing real, which is all things mindset and business strategy for private practice owners. So when I had my private practice, I felt like I was showing up for everyone, everywhere, all the time. But here was the reality. The reality was that I was seldom present. So I'd physically be there, but my mind was somewhere else. I wasn't really listening to everyone. I wasn't showing up as the CEO version of myself. And it really showed. What I thought was happening, what was really happening were two completely different things. And the most important person that I wasn't listening to was myself. So I want you to remember that how you do one thing is how you do everything. So I want you to ask yourself, when I'm listening to others, am I listening to speak or am I listening to understand? Okay. So when I'm going to talk about communication and listening, this all really ties together because you, as the CEO version of yourself, need to be aware of where you are listening from versus where you are thinking from, because these can be two completely different things. So when we're shifting to that CEO identity of yourselves, she is congruent. She is congruent in how she communicates and how she listens. They are one. So without this congruency, a lot of things will fall apart. And this will show up both in your life and in your business. So we've talked about before the thoughts that you think and what you say. Now we're going to tie it all together with how you listen. Because if you're not listening to others, you're not fully listening to yourself. And that is where the true embodiment of a CEO lies, especially when we talk about be, do, and have. So some of you may be familiar with the different types of listening. There's different schools of thought on this, but I'm going to do just a high level overview because really what the purpose and the takeaway of this video is how this all ties together with you and your business. So the first level is pretending, which also seems pretty self-explanatory, but follow me for a minute, okay? So this is typically happens, we learn this as a child where we're pretending to listen. It's really surface level. We're not really absorbing any information, right? And usually the response is, I get that all the time from my kids, right? So the next is selective. So that's like a step up, which I feel like, especially with my own children, I feel like I get this a lot, right? So that is either consciously or unconsciously only hearing parts, listening to parts of the message, typically that you want to hear, right? So then there's the attentive listening, which is you're listening and you're pretty engaged. This level of listening is kind of sneaky because you may appear engaged or others may be appearing engaged to you, but they're really not understanding the nuance of the message or the underlying words behind the message. Okay. Then the next one is active listening. And I feel like, especially when I was in grad school, we talked about this one quite a bit. So, and as clinicians, and a lot of times part of what it is that we do is not only education, but we counsel, right? So when we think of active listening, we are listening and we are engaged. Not only are we engaged, we're asking questions, we're using body language to communicate, and we are also interpreting the other person, our communication partner's body language to really understand what the underlying message is behind the words. We're very active, right? And then the highest form of listening then is empathetic listening. So that is the most effective of all these different stages or phases or levels, whatever you want to call it, of listening, right? So this is you're paying attention to the word, the body language, the emotion behind the words, and you're fully understanding the message and the meaning behind the message and the words, right? So all this to say, when we think about like, I know in the past I've used like, the phrase like, you're hearing me, but you're not listening, right? So, like, that's kind of attributing to the fact that you feel like someone that you're talking to is pretending or selectively listening, not fully understanding how you're trying to communicate or what it is that you're trying to communicate, right? So, before I had asked you to, reflect on, are you listening to speak or listening to understand? So I want you to flip that now, because actually I'm going to use a different color. We're talking about how all this listening feeds into congruent communication. Is we have, actually, I'm not even going to, well, I just don't know if you can see this. I'm not going to write it all out. Not enough space. But when I want you to flip it from the interpersonal, so you and another person, to intrapersonal. So, as I alluded to in my story during my private practice journey, right? Because how you do one thing is how you do everything. So, are you truly listening to yourself? Because a lot of the time, what happens, especially when we throw out around words like burnout, overwhelmed, stressed out, exhausted, these are a lot of just surface level symptoms of it more true underlying, I don't want to say problem, but underlying cause, right? And that cause, and talked about it several videos ago, when we look and if we're looking around at our external world and we see, A, everything's on fire, and B, we feel like our burnout is coming from external sources. It's my business, it's my systems, it's my partner, it's my kids. We think that it's all of these other things that are external to us. Although it may appear that way, everything lies from within. Everything starts from within. So when I ask you, like, are you listening to yourself? When we talk about these surface level symptomatic things that are occurring, whether, that's full, like, and then we're starting to feel it in our bodies, but are we listening to our bodies? That's key. Are we listening to what we feel is working for us, what's not working for us, what we like, what we don't like? Are we working towards our goal? All these things, they're all from within. So all of this burnout and overwhelm and all of these things, that's because we are disconnected from our bodies and we're disconnected from ourselves. And for me, I can speak to the fact that I completely lost myself at a point and I didn't know who I was. And I went through a complete crash out of an identity crisis because I didn't know who I was outside of being a speech pathologist, being a private practice owner, being a mom. Like, I was like, I don't have hobbies. I don't know what I like. I don't know who I am. Who am I? Right? Because I wasn't communicating with myself. I wasn't listening to myself. I was not congruent. So, again, your CEO version of yourself is congruent in all ways of communication, from listening, speaking, thoughts, all the things. So, you need to ask yourself, what do you really want to see in your business? What would you love your days to look like? And really listen to yourself. And what are the ideal clients that you serve? Because you may find that it may not be what it is that you're doing right now, or something you may have said to yourself long ago, or like, oh, when this happens, then da, 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 da. Or I need to make X amount of revenue before I can niche down or scale, or whatever these conditions that you put on yourself as to why you're not doing the thing, right? So where are you doing business? How are you doing business? Are you in person? Are you virtual? Are you hybrid? Listen to yourself and what it is. What do you desire to do? What do you want to see? And what does your life look like? What's a day in the life look like for you? Your ideal day in the life, your ideal week in the life, your ideal vacation, like your time off. What do these things look like? And really listen to what it is. Because usually the culprit of all of this is we're not taking the time, never took the time, don't think we have time to really like get down to the nitty gritty of what it is that we want. And then what happens is that we're not congruent and that we are misaligned in our careers, in our practice, in our lives. And what's happening within us is being outwardly expressed everywhere, and we're just so disconnected and not listening that we are failing to see and connect the dots on our own. So you probably didn't think it was going to get this deep this fast. And again, this is only surface level. I dive a whole lot deeper into a lot of this work in my program, the Private Practice Burnout Solution. So this is the real work to really get out of burnout and stay out. But you really have to go within, because all of these things and all these fires that you're seeing and all these problems that you're having are all due to what's going on inside. So you really have to listen and then be able to communicate, not only interpersonally, obviously, like I'm a speech language pathologist, so I do this for a living. So I feel like I have really great interpersonal communication skills. And again, that didn't always translate as I got to a point where I wasn't doing that within myself. It didn't turn inward to see what was going on with myself. So you have to ask yourself that, do you feel in alignment right now versus that future version? Because that future version is in alignment. And where's the gap? What is not congruent between what you envision for yourself and what is happening right now? And then that is how we reverse engineer that and close that gap. So again, to get to that CEO future version of yourself that is congruent by always of communication, by listening, that is how you get out of burnout and stay out. So I hope that you found this helpful. If you did, it would mean a lot if you like, share, comment, subscribe, all the things to get this video and this information out to the people who need it most. And you can take my 2-minute Are You the Bottleneck quiz link below to find out who or what is slowing down you and your progress. And I'll see you in the next one.